and they were levering up and taking the money out. In fact, home leverage went up substantially. You can see that. It went up to 55%. And if you look at, instead of looking at leverage as a percentage of equity, how much of the total value have you borrowed, look at as what is the interest payment, how much debt you have as, divided by your wages and salaries. The debt is about more than 1.5 times the annual wages. So it's just pretty high. And also you can see from 2000 onwards, it suddenly started increasing very fast. So home prices shot up, and households just took some of that increase out for consumption purposes. Okay, so I'm going to write down a little model, and you have to ask yourself, how much. Suppose I say that I was consuming so much last year, I consumed so much this year, my consumption went up. You have to ask, why did my consumption go up? It's reasonable to say that it went up because maybe your wages and salaries went up. Maybe you are wealthier. So if my wages and salaries go up by $1, I'll consume maybe 70-80% of that, right? In the form of increased consumption. And if my wealth went up, then the interest income I'll get out of that will also go up. So my consumption will go up correspondingly. In addition, I may say, I'm an old guy, so maybe I'll also take out some of this. I don't have to leave everything for my children. Actually, I may not want to leave anything for the children. I may want to take all of it. And so, if you ask yourself, why would my consumption this year different from last year's consumption? It's reasonable to say, my wages went up and my wealth went up, and a percentage of the increased wage will be consumed, and a percentage of the increased wealth will be coming to help consumption in the form of increase in the interest income, and also part of the capital itself I'll withdraw because I don't need to save so much. Okay, so how will you do that? You just write down an equation saying year-to-year change in consumption equals a constant plus a percentage of a fraction of the wages and salary increases plus a fraction of the increased wealth in housing, and also a fraction of the increased wealth in other assets like stocks and other things. Okay, so what I can do is that I have from 1980 onwards, I have year by year increases in consumption, and I can also look at increases in wages and salaries, increases in real estate equity, and increase in other wealth, and then do a regression, and I find this equation to be a reasonable fit. What it says is that 71% for $1 increase in wages and salaries, my consumption will go up by 71 cents. So it won't be 100 one for one. And if my wealth goes up by $1, I will consume 8.4 cents more in that year. And if notice here, the wealth is real estate equity. If my wealth in the stock market goes up, it doesn't affect consumption at all, because people don't seem to think that stock market wealth is stable, or they are not able to take the money out by borrowing against the stock market wealth. And let's see how good this model, it's a very simple model, and this is a model that standard economic theory also predicts how consumption should change as wealth and income changes, and see how the fit looks like. These are changes, okay, so there's no trend. You can see it catches almost the predicted values and the actual changes are plotted, and you can see it captures all the turning points. Such a simple description fits reality pretty close. And then what do you see from here? US households didn't consume. If you give them $1 extra in terms of income, they are not going to consume all of it. Of course, you will say, where is the rest going? They pay about 18%. The average tax is like 18% or 20%. Then they have a little bit in terms of Social Security taxes. But taxes in the US, you can think of it as saving in some sense, hopefully. At least the Social Security, if you believe in the Social Security system. Because remember, in the world today, there is really no saving. Okay, if in a very primitive, if you go to rural villages, you can think of saving as taking your, wheat or rice and storing it in a silo and taking it out. But every other form of saving is really a contract between people that, I consume today, I'll come tomorrow, and then I'll take it from you, so you consume less. So it's all contractual. So one thing that I want to take out from here, the myth is that American consumers are consuming too much and they're not rational. So what this says is that that behavior is actually very rational, given that belief that what they see as increased wealth is indeed increased wealth and not illusory wealth that vanished. So to recap, American consumers consume substantially more than their income in the 21st century. They did so because they felt wealthier as home prices went up. That helped them borrow using mortgage loans. Now I'm going to follow this up and at least try to get some answers to the questions that naturally arise at this point in time as to why did home prices go up? What is the relation to current account deficit, this home price increase? So let's look at the current account deficit and capital flows. If I just took these numbers in one of these representative years, like if you have $100 increase in GDP per US household, $22 of that, whatever drives the GDP growth will also cost $22 spent on imports. The same underlying forces will also trigger $14 of increase in exports. And so there will be an $8 deficit. And that $8 deficit will be matched because accounts out to balance will be matched by capital inflow into the US from outside. Let's take for convenience it flows back from China. In the early years, just to reiterate what I just said, in the late 90s and early in this century, most of this flow was into the US treasuries. Of course, the treasury yields dropped, made mortgage-related debt more attractive. Subsequent capital flow went into mortgage-backed securities and other assets, resulting in mortgage interest rates to come down. And that is not the only reason. Also, because so much money was available, the underwriting standards came down and the money was made available easier. It's not just the interest rate effect. So mortgages were low in terms of interest rate and also available more easily. Led to increased demand for housing, feeds back through the, if housing prices go up and there's a feedback, at least in the short run, increased wealth effect, increased consumption, imports, and current account deficit. It's sort of a bad brief feedback effect. So if you plot the mortgage interest rate and current account deficit, this is how the picture looks like. It's not a great fit. In fact, if you look at the current account deficit to the mortgage interest rate effect, you can see that there's a little bit of a lagged effect in terms of when the peaks and troughs match. Right? Remember, one is the deficit, so it's on the. So there is some relation, but it's not that obvious. They don't act right away. So if I want to look at some of the feedback effects, so when the current account deficit increases, the pool of outstanding mortgages should increase, in part due to reduction in mortgage rates and in part due to easy availability of credit. So if I regress the change in the pool of home mortgages on the current account deficit and the change in the level of US Treasury debt, what you find is that when the current account deficit goes up, the pool of increasing home mortgages go up. And it's almost one for one. Okay, and there is also some effect because the treasuries also take there's a crowding out effect by the treasuries. And also then, so what I established is that at least this is just an association. The causality is very difficult to establish. It can only come back